The whispers started the moment Martha Brennan walked through the doors of the Petaluma social hall, her fuller figure wrapped in the best dress she owned, a deep burgundy calico that her mother had helped her sew with trembling hands just weeks before consumption took her. It was August of 1874, and the summer heat hung thick in the California air, as Martha stood on the threshold of what should have been an evening of joy and dancing, but instead felt like stepping into a courtroom where she had already been judged and found wanting. "Look at the size of her," came a harsh whisper from near the refreshment table, where Constance Miller stood with her rail-thin frame draped in expensive silk, imported all the way from San Francisco. "Bold as brass, thinking she belongs here with decent folk." Martha's cheeks burned hotter than the August sun, but she lifted her chin and walked further into the hall. The social was the biggest event Petaluma had seen all summer, with ranchers and farmers coming in from miles around, their families dressed in their finest for an evening of music and celebration. Paper lanterns hung from the rafters, casting warm golden light across the polished wooden floor, and a small band of fiddlers, a banjo player, and a man with a worn guitar were tuning their instruments in the corner. She had spent 3 weeks debating whether to come at all. After her mother's death 6 months prior, Martha had thrown herself into running their small boarding house on the edge of town, cooking and cleaning for the handful of ranch hands and travelers who needed a clean bed and a hot meal. At 22 years old, she had resigned herself to a life of practical work, of being useful rather than beautiful, of being the woman men came to for sustenance but never for romance. But her mother's dying words had been about living, about not hiding away from the world just because Martha's body carried more curves and softness than fashion deemed acceptable. So she had come, even knowing what awaited her. "I heard she eats enough for 3 men, another voice tittered, this one belonging to Sarah Patterson, whose parents owned the largest mercantile in town. "No wonder she looks like that." Martha found a spot along the wall where she could observe without being too conspicuous, though at her size, she knew conspicuous was relative. She watched as couples began to form on the dance floor, the fiddlers striking up a lively reel that had skirts swirling and boots stomping in time. Young women giggled behind their hands as young men approached with nervous grins and sweaty palms. Older couples moved with practiced ease, decades of partnership evident in how they anticipated each other's movements. Nobody approached Martha. She told herself she had expected this, that it did not matter, that she had come simply to be out among people rather than hiding in her boarding house like some kind of hermit. But expectation did not dull the ache of rejection, and understanding the cruelty did not make it hurt any less. "Did you see how much fabric it must have taken to make that dress?" Constance's voice carried clearly across the room, intentionally loud enough for Martha to hear. "What a waste of perfectly good material." Several women laughed, the sound like glass breaking. Martha's hands clenched in the folds of her skirt, her fingernails digging into her palms through the layers of fabric. She would not cry. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. The dancing continued, the music swelling and spinning through the warm night air. Martha watched a young couple, newly married, gaze at each other with such open adoration that it made her chest tight with longing. She watched children dart between their elders, playing games of tag and giggling with the pure joy that came before the world taught them to be cruel. She watched and she ached, and she wondered why she had been foolish enough to hope. The song ended, and as the dancers caught their breath and the musicians prepared their next piece, the doors to the social hall swung open again. The conversations around the room stuttered and died as heads turned to see who had arrived so late to the festivities. The man who stood in the doorway was tall, broad-shouldered, and dusty from travel. He wore simple clothes, denim work pants, and a cotton shirt that had seen better days, with a leather vest that bore the marks of hard use. A dark hat sat on his head, shadowing eyes that Martha could not quite make out from her position along the wall. He carried himself with the easy confidence of a man who had nothing to prove but knew his own worth nonetheless. "That is Nathan Norwood," someone whispered nearby. "The horsebreaker from up Sacramento way. Heard he was coming down to work with the Rodriguez Ranch." "I heard he can gentle the wildest Mustang without breaking their spirit," another voice added with clear admiration. "They say he has a gift." Nathan Norwood removed his hat as he stepped fully into the hall, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and a face that was more rugged than handsome, with strong features and weathered skin that spoke of countless hours under the sun. He looked to be perhaps 25 or 26, old enough to have seen some of life, but young enough to still believe in possibilities. His gaze swept the room, taking in the assembled crowd with what seemed like careful assessment. Martha found herself straightening slightly against the wall, though she immediately felt foolish for it. A man like that would have his pick of any woman in the hall. Her moment of attention would pass as quickly as a summer storm, gone before it could mean anything. The musicians struck up a waltz, slower and more elegant than the reels that had come before. Couples moved onto the floor, settling into the familiar pattern of the dance. Nathan stood watching for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to Martha's utter shock, he began walking directly toward her. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Surely he was not coming to her. Surely he was heading for someone else, someone standing near her that she had not noticed. But his eyes were fixed on her face, and as he drew closer, she could see they were a warm brown, like creek stones in sunlight. "Evening, miss," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to resonate in her chest. "I am wondering if you might grant me the honor of this dance." The conversations around them stopped so abruptly that the silence was almost physical. Martha's mouth went dry. She looked at him, searching for any sign of mockery, any hint that this was some cruel joke orchestrated by Constance and her circle of vipers. But his expression was open, genuine, with a slight smile that created creases at the corners of his eyes. "I don't—" Martha's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. She cleared her throat and tried again. "I am not certain that is a wise idea." "Why not?" Nathan asked, and he sounded genuinely curious rather than challenging. "I am not exactly—" Martha gestured vaguely at herself, acutely aware of every eye in the hall boring into her. "I am not the sort of woman men typically ask to dance." Something flickered across Nathan's face, an emotion too quick for her to identify. But when he spoke, his voice was gentle. "Well, I am asking, and from where I am standing, you look like exactly the sort of woman I would like to dance with." "She will probably crush your feet," Constance called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Best choose someone else, Mr. Norwood, before you end up injured." Nathan's jaw tightened, but he did not turn to acknowledge Constance. Instead, he extended his hand to Martha, palm up, waiting. "The only person whose opinion matters right now is yours, miss. What do you say?" Martha looked at his hand, calloused and strong, honest hands that had worked and built and created. She thought of her mother's dying wish for her to live fully. She thought of all the dances she had never been asked to join, all the moments of joy she had denied herself, because society had deemed her body unacceptable. She thought of the warmth in this stranger's eyes, and the way he was still waiting, patient and steady, for her decision. She placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, gentle but secure, and he smiled. It was a real smile, the kind that transformed his entire face and made her breath catch. He led her onto the dance floor, and Martha was intensely aware of every whisper, every judgmental stare, every sneer from the women who had spent the evening making her feel small. But then Nathan placed his other hand on her waist, respectful and appropriate, and drew her into the waltz position, and suddenly the rest of the room faded into insignificance. "I am Nathan Norwood," he said as they began to move. "Just arrived in Petaluma this afternoon." "Martha Brennan," she replied, focusing on her feet, terrified of stumbling and proving everyone right about her ungainliness. "Look at me, not your feet," Nathan said softly. "Trust yourself. You are doing fine." Martha lifted her eyes to his and found herself caught in his steady gaze. He led her smoothly through the waltz, his movements sure and easy, guiding her without forcing. To her surprise, she found herself following naturally, her body knowing the steps, even though her mind was racing with disbelief and anxiety. "You dance well," Nathan said, after they had made a full circuit of the floor. Martha nearly stumbled at the compliment. "You do not need to flatter me. I am not in the habit of saying things I do not mean," he replied, and there was a firmness to his tone that made her believe him. "You have good rhythm, and you are light on your feet. Those are facts, not flattery." They danced in silence for another minute, and Martha began to feel something she had not expected. She began to feel graceful, feminine, worthy. The music swelled around them, the violin singing out above the other instruments, and Nathan spun her gently, her skirt flaring out as she turned. "Why did you ask me to dance?" The question burst from Martha before she could stop it. "There are plenty of other women here, prettier women, smaller women." Nathan's expression grew serious. "Do you want the honest truth?" "Please." "I walked in here, and I looked around this room, and you were the only person who seemed real to me," Nathan said, his voice low enough that only she could hear over the music. "Everyone else was wearing masks, playing parts, pretending to be something. But you were just sitting there with all your hurt and hope written clear on your face. And I thought to myself that here was a woman brave enough to show up, despite knowing how she would be treated. That is the kind of courage I admire." Martha's eyes burned with sudden tears. "You do not know anything about me." "I know you came here tonight even though it was hard," Nathan said. "I know you held your head high when those women said cruel things. I know you have kind eyes and a pretty smile, though I have not seen much of the smile yet. I know you dance well and you are being too hard on yourself. And I know that every other man in this room is a fool for not seeing what I see." "And what do you see?" Martha whispered, afraid to hope but unable to stop herself from asking. Nathan was quiet for a moment, his hand warm and steady on her waist as they moved through the steps of the waltz. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but utterly certain. "I see a beautiful woman who has been told lies her whole life. I see someone who has been made to feel less than when she is anything but. I see perfection being judged by people who would not know real beauty if it bit them." The tears spilled over then, running down Martha's cheeks despite her best efforts to contain them. Nathan's grip on her hand tightened supportively, and he guided her through a turn that took them toward the edge of the dance floor, away from the worst of the prying eyes. "You think I am perfect?" Martha asked, her voice breaking on the words. "I think the only opinion that matters is yours," Nathan replied. "But yes, from where I stand, you are perfect exactly as you are. The size of your body does not determine your worth. It does not make you less deserving of respect, of kindness, of romance and joy, and all the things every person should have in their life." The music was coming to an end, the final notes of the waltz hanging in the air like a benediction. Nathan slowed their movement, but he did not release her hand. They stood there on the dance floor, facing each other, while around them other couples broke apart and the room filled with chatter, and the sound of the band preparing their next song. "Thank you," Martha said, inadequate as the words were for what she was feeling. "You cannot know what this means to me." "Would you like to step outside for some air?" Nathan asked. "It is powerful warm in here, and I could use some coolness." Martha nodded, not trusting her voice. Nathan offered her his arm, and she took it, letting him escort her through the crowd toward the doors. She kept her head up as they passed Constance and her friends, refusing to cower even as she felt their hateful stares boring into her back. The night air outside the social hall was blessedly cool after the closeness of the crowded room. The sky above was brilliant with stars, the kind of display that only happened far from city lights, and a slight breeze carried the scent of dry grass and distant water from the Petaluma Creek. The sounds of music and laughter drifted out through the open windows, but out here it was muted, peaceful. Nathan walked with Martha along the side of the building to where a few rough-hewn benches sat beneath an old oak tree. Paper lanterns hung from the lower branches, casting gentle light across the dusty ground. They sat down side by side, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. "I should apologize," Nathan finally said. "That was probably too forward of me, saying those things to a woman I have just met." "Do not apologize," Martha said firmly. "Those were the kindest words anyone has said to me in longer than I can remember. My mother used to tell me I was beautiful, but mothers have to say such things. Hearing it from someone who has no obligation to be kind, that is different. Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She was." Martha's voice caught. "She died 6 months ago. Consumption." "I am sorry for your loss," Nathan said, and the sympathy in his voice was genuine. "My own mother passed when I was 15. Fever took her. It is a hard thing, losing the person who loved you before you had to earn it." They sat together in companionable silence, sharing the particular understanding that only comes from similar grief. Inside the hall, the music changed to a lively square dance, and they could hear the caller shouting instructions over the stomping of dozens of feet. "You said you are a horsebreaker?" Martha asked, wanting to know more about this man who had appeared so suddenly in her life like an answer to a prayer she had not known she was saying. Nathan nodded. I work with difficult horses, the ones other people have given up on or who have been mistreated. I help them learn to trust again, to work with humans instead of against them. It is patient work, but I find it rewarding. That sounds like it requires a special temperament, Martha observed. Patience and empathy are not qualities everyone possesses. I suppose that is true, Nathan agreed. I have always felt like horses, and people are not so different. They both respond better to kindness than to force. They both remember cruelty and carry it with them. And they both deserve to be treated with respect, regardless of whether they meet some arbitrary standard of what they should be. Martha looked at him in the lantern light, studying his profile. Is that why you asked me to dance? Because you saw some kind of mistreated horse you could rescue? Nathan turned to face her fully, his expression serious. No, I asked you to dance because when I looked at you, I felt something in my chest tighten up, and I wanted to know you. The fact that those women were being cruel just made me angry and more determined. But the initial impulse, that was all about you, about wanting to be near you. Martha's heart was racing again. You felt something just from looking at me? Is that so hard to believe? Yes, Martha said bluntly. I have spent my entire adult life being invisible to men, except as someone to cook their meals and wash their clothes. The idea that someone could look at me and feel attraction, that seems like fantasy. Nathan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently took her hand. His thumb traced small circles on her palm, the gesture somehow both innocent and intimate. Martha, I cannot speak for those other men. Maybe they were fools, or maybe they were too concerned with what other people think to trust their own feelings. But I can tell you what I feel. When I look at you, I see warm eyes and a lovely face. I see curves that any sane man would appreciate. I see strength and courage and a sadness that makes me want to do whatever I can to ease it. I see a woman I want to know better, if she will give me the chance. I run a boarding house, Martha said, the words tumbling out in a rush, as if confessing to something shameful. It is not elegant work. I cook and clean and change linens and deal with rowdy ranch hands and the occasional drunk. My hands are red from lye soap, and my hair always smells like cooking grease, no matter how much I wash it. I am not delicate or refined or any of the things men are supposed to want. Good, Nathan said simply. Because I am not looking for delicate or refined. I am looking for real. I am looking for someone who knows what work means, who understands that life is not some pretty picture, but something you build with your own hands. I am looking for someone who can hold her head up in the face of cruelty and come out the other side still standing. Martha felt like she could not breathe. You are talking like you want to court me, but we have known each other less than an hour. I know it is fast, Nathan acknowledged, but I have learned that when you feel something real, you do not waste time second-guessing it. I am 26 years old, Martha. I have been from Sacramento to San Diego and plenty of places in between. I have met more women than I can count, and not once, not ever, have I felt what I felt when I looked at you tonight. That has to mean something. It could just mean you were tired from traveling, and the lantern light was flattering, Martha said. But there was no conviction behind the words. She was grasping for reasons to protect herself, to not believe in this impossible thing that was happening. Nathan smiled, that transforming expression that made him go from rugged to genuinely handsome. The lantern light is the same for every woman in that hall, but you are the only one I wanted to dance with. You are the only one I followed outside. You are the only one whose hand I am holding right now, hoping she will not pull away. Martha looked down at their joined hands, his so much larger than hers, calloused and strong. She should pull away. She should protect herself from the inevitable hurt that would come when he realized his mistake, when the novelty wore off and he saw her as everyone else did. But she could not bring herself to break the connection. I am frightened, she admitted in a whisper. I have never done this before, never been courted or pursued or any of it. I do not know the rules. There are no rules, Nathan said. Just two people trying to get to know each other. How about we start simple? Tell me about your boarding house. How did you come to be running it? And so Martha talked, the words coming easier as the minutes passed. She told him about her parents, her father, who had died when she was young, and her mother, who had taken in boarders to make ends meet. She told him about learning to cook for crowds, about managing difficult personalities, about the satisfaction of providing a clean, safe place for people passing through. She told him about the garden she tended behind the house, about her love of reading the few books she owned, about her secret dream of someday traveling to San Francisco to see the ocean properly instead of just the muddy creek that ran through Petaluma. Nathan listened with complete attention, asking questions, laughing at the funny stories, sympathizing with the hard times. And then he talked about his own life, about growing up on a small ranch, about discovering his gift with horses, about the satisfaction of seeing a terrified animal learn to trust again. He told her about his travels, about sleeping under the stars more often than under a roof, about the freedom of the open road and the loneliness that sometimes came with it. They talked until the music from the social hall grew quieter, until couples began emerging and heading for their wagons and horses. They talked until the lanterns in the oak tree burned low, and the night grew genuinely cool. They talked like people who had known each other for years rather than hours, sharing pieces of themselves with an ease that felt both natural and miraculous. "I should get back," Martha finally said, reluctantly when she noticed people departing in earnest. "I have 4 boarders right now, and they will be wanting breakfast at dawn." "May I walk you home?" Nathan asked. Martha hesitated. Her boarding house was only a few streets away, close enough that she normally walked without concern. But having Nathan escort her felt significant, like crossing a threshold she could not uncross. "Yes," she said, deciding that tonight was already so far beyond her normal experience that she might as well embrace it fully. "I would like that." They stood, and Nathan offered his arm again. Martha took it, feeling the solid strength of him beside her as they walked away from the social hall and into the quiet streets of Petaluma. Most of the town was dark, though light spilled from a few saloons and the occasional window where families were settling in for the night. "Do you know where you will be staying while you work with the Rodriguez Ranch?" Martha asked as they walked. They mentioned a bunkhouse, but I will be honest, I have been sleeping rough for so long that even a barn sounds luxurious, Nathan said with a chuckle. "Why do you ask?" Martha's heart pounded, but she forced herself to speak. "My boarding house is clean, and the beds are comfortable. I cook 3 meals a day, though boarders are on their own for the noon meal, unless they arrange something special. The rate is reasonable, and the company is generally tolerable." "Are you offering me a room?" "I am offering you the option of a room," Martha clarified. "If you would prefer the bunkhouse, I will not be offended, but the offer stands." Nathan was quiet for a moment as they turned onto Martha's street. "I would like that very much. Fair warning, though. I will probably be underfoot more than a regular boarder. I will want to sit in your kitchen and talk to you while you cook. I will want to walk with you in the evening after work. I will want to know everything about you, and I suspect I will become a nuisance." "That does not sound like a nuisance," Martha said softly. "That sounds like something I would very much enjoy." They arrived at the boarding house, a 2-story wooden structure that Martha's father had built with his own hands before she was born. It was not fancy, but it was solid and well-maintained, with flower boxes under the windows that Martha kept filled with geraniums and a front porch with a rocking chair where she sometimes sat on quiet evenings. "It is a fine-looking place," Nathan said approvingly. "You keep it well." "Thank you," Martha said, absurdly pleased by the compliment. "Would you like to come in? I can show you the available room, and we can discuss terms." They went inside to the small front parlor that served as a common area for the boarders. The room was dark except for the moonlight streaming through the windows, but Martha knew every inch of the space. She lit a lamp on the side table, warm light filling the room and revealing the worn but comfortable furniture, the braided rug her mother had made, the shelf of books that was Martha's most prized possession. "It is homey," Nathan said, and it was clear he meant it as a compliment. "You can tell someone cares about this place." Martha led him upstairs, acutely aware that they were alone in the dim corridor. She showed him the empty room at the end of the hall, the one that had the best view of the garden and the creek beyond. It was simple but clean, with an iron frame bed covered in a quilt Martha had made herself, a washstand with a ceramic basin and pitcher, and a small desk and chair beneath the window. "This would suit me perfectly," Nathan said after looking around. "What are your terms?" Martha named her usual weekly rate, which included the room and 2 meals daily. Nathan agreed immediately, reaching into his pocket to pull out coins for the first week. "You can start tomorrow," Martha said, "or tonight if you prefer. I will need to put fresh linens on the bed, but that will only take a moment." "Tomorrow is fine," Nathan said. "I have my bedroll with my horse at the livery, and I already paid for tonight's board for the animal. But I will be here for breakfast, if that is acceptable." Breakfast is at 6, Martha said. Do not be late or the ranch hands will eat everything in sight. Nathan smiled. I will be here at 5:30 then. That way I can watch you cook and annoy you with my presence like I promised. They stood there in the doorway of what would be his room, neither quite willing to end the evening. The lamp Martha held cast dancing shadows on the walls, and somewhere outside a dog barked, the sound distant and lonely. Thank you for tonight, Martha said finally. For the dance, for the conversation, for making me feel like perhaps I am not as impossible as I have always believed myself to be. Nathan reached out and gently touched her cheek, his fingers light as feathers against her skin. You were never impossible, Martha. The world was just too blind to see you properly, but I see you, and I am not going anywhere. He left then, heading down the stairs and out into the night, leaving Martha standing in the hallway with her lamp and her racing heart and the ghost of his touch still warm on her face. She did not sleep much that night. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the evening, the cruel words from Constance and the others, Nathan walking toward her with determination in his eyes, the feel of his hand in hers as they danced, his voice saying she was perfect, beautiful, worthy. Part of her kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for reality to intrude on this fairy tale. But another part, the part that her mother had always encouraged, the part that still believed in hope despite everything, that part dared to imagine that maybe, just maybe, this was real. Dawn came too quickly and too slowly all at once. Martha rose before the sun, splashing cold water on her face from the basin in her room, and dressing in her usual work clothes, a simple cotton dress in a practical blue with an apron tied over it. She braided her hair and pinned it up, then headed downstairs to start the fire in the kitchen stove. She was pulling out ingredients for biscuits when she heard the back door open. She turned, her hands full of flour, and there was Nathan, hat in hand, and a tentative smile on his face. I know you said 6, but I was awake, and I thought perhaps you could use help with the morning fire, he said. The fire is already going, Martha said, her own smile blooming despite her exhaustion. But you could fetch water from the pump if you are determined to be useful. That I can do. They fell into an easy rhythm, Nathan hauling water, while Martha mixed biscuit dough and started bacon sizzling in a cast-iron skillet. The kitchen filled with warm, savory smells as the sky outside lightened from black to deep blue to the pale gold of early morning. The other boarders began trickling in just before 6. There was old George Patterson, who worked at the livery and was some distant relation to the Patterson family that owned the mercantile, though he acted like he had never heard the name. There were the Murphy brothers, ranch hands who spent most of their time working cattle for the Roberts family north of town. And there was Samuel Chen, who everyone called Sam, a quiet man who had come from Sacramento and worked at the lumber mill. They all nodded greeting to Martha as they took their seats at the long kitchen table, but their eyes lingered on Nathan with curiosity. Boys, this is Nathan Norwood, Martha said as she began loading plates with biscuits, bacon, and eggs. He will be staying here while he works with the Rodriguez Ranch. Nathan, this is George, Sean, and Patrick Murphy, and Sam. There was a round of greetings and handshakes, sizing up as men do when a new person enters their territory. But Nathan had an easy confidence that seemed to put them at ease, and by the time everyone was eating, conversation was flowing naturally. You are the horsebreaker everyone has been talking about, George said around a mouthful of biscuit. Heard you can gentle a Mustang in half the time it takes anyone else. I do not know about that, Nathan said modestly, but I have been blessed with patience and a feel for what horses need. Rodriguez has got a stallion that has been nothing but trouble, Patrick Murphy offered. Beautiful animal, but mean as a snake. Kicked his last handler so hard the man was laid up for a month. Sounds like the stallion had good reason, Nathan said mildly. Animals do not generally go mean without cause. The men discussed horses and ranching, while Martha moved between the table and the stove, refilling plates and coffee cups. She was intensely aware of Nathan's presence, the way he glanced at her frequently, as if checking to make sure she was still there. She was aware of how natural he looked sitting at her table, how right it felt to have him in her kitchen. After breakfast, the boarders headed off to their various jobs, leaving Martha to clean up. Nathan rolled up his sleeves without being asked, and began pumping water into the wash basin. You do not have to help, Martha protested. You must have things to do, and cleaning up after breakfast is my job. I want to help, Nathan said simply. And besides, I meant what I said about wanting to spend time with you. If that means washing dishes, then I am content to wash dishes." They worked together, Martha washing and Nathan drying and putting away. Through the kitchen window, they could see the sun fully rising now, burning off the last of the morning coolness and promising another hot August day. "I should head to the Rodriguez ranch soon," Nathan said when the last dish was dried and stacked. "But I will be back this evening. Would you like to take a walk after supper? I noticed the creek runs behind your property, and I thought it might be pleasant." "I would like that," Martha said, feeling warmth bloom in her chest that had nothing to do with the heat from the stove. Nathan reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture so tender that Martha felt tears prick her eyes. "Until tonight, then." He left through the back door, and Martha stood in her kitchen surrounded by the familiar and the ordinary, except nothing felt ordinary anymore. Everything felt transformed, like the world had tilted on its axis and shown her a completely different view. The day passed in its usual routine of chores and preparations. Martha changed linens, swept floors, weeded the garden, and started preparations for the evening meal. But all day her mind kept wandering to Nathan, wondering what he was doing, if he was thinking of her, if last night and this morning had been as significant for him as they had been for her. Late afternoon brought clouds rolling in from the west, and by the time Martha was serving supper, rain was falling in steady sheets. The boarders came in wet and tired, tracking mud that Martha bit her tongue about because it could not be helped. They ate quickly, eager to get to their rooms and dry clothes. Nathan was the last to arrive, soaked through and looking apologetic. "I am sorry for the mess," he said, indicating the water pooling around his boots. "The rain caught me halfway from the ranch." "Get upstairs and into dry things," Martha ordered. "I will save you a plate." He obeyed, and when he came back down in clean clothes with his wet hair slicked back, Martha had his supper waiting at the now empty table. She sat with him while he ate, nursing a cup of tea and listening as he told her about his first day at the Rodriguez ranch. "The stallion they are worried about is magnificent," Nathan said, his eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "Pure black with intelligence in his eyes. Someone broke his trust badly, you can see it in how he holds himself, but I think I can reach him." "How do you do it?" Martha asked. "Reach them, I mean." "Patience mostly," Nathan said, "and showing them that not all humans are the same, that some of us can be trusted. It is about creating a partnership instead of enforcing dominance. The horse has to choose to work with me, not just submit to force." "That sounds like a good philosophy for more than just horses," Martha observed. "It is a good philosophy for everything," Nathan agreed. He finished his meal and pushed the plate away, then looked toward the window where rain continued to stream down the glass. "I suppose our walk will have to wait for another evening. We could sit on the front porch," Martha suggested. "It is covered, and I always liked watching the rain." So they moved to the porch, sitting in the two rocking chairs Martha kept there. The rain created a curtain of sound around them, and the air smelled of wet earth and growing things. It was fully dark now, the kind of complete darkness that only came when storm clouds blocked the stars. "Tell me about what it was like growing up here," Nathan said. "Have you always lived in Petaluma?" Martha nodded. "My whole life. My father built this house before I was born. He died when I was 8, thrown from a horse, ironically enough. My mother never remarried. She said she had loved once, and that was enough for her. That must have been hard, losing him so young." "I do not remember as much as I wish I did," Martha admitted. "Flashes mostly, his laugh, the way he would toss me in the air and catch me. How safe I felt when he carried me on his shoulders. My mother remembered everything, though, and she told me stories so I would know who he was." "And then you lost her too," Nathan said gently. "That is a lot of grief for one person to carry." "Everyone loses people," Martha said, though her voice wavered. "That is just part of living." "It is," Nathan agreed. "But that does not make it easier. My father is still alive, still running the ranch where I grew up, but we do not speak much anymore. He wanted me to stay, to take over eventually. When I chose a different path, he took it personally. Said I was throwing away my heritage for foolishness." "Do you regret leaving?" Nathan was quiet for a long moment, the rain filling the silence. "No," he finally said. "I needed to find my own way, be my own man. Staying would have been slow suffocation, but I do regret the hurt it caused. I wish he could have understood that leaving was not about rejecting him, but about finding myself. They rocked in their chairs, the rhythm matching without either of them consciously trying to coordinate. It was peaceful in a way Martha had never experienced with another person. Comfortable silence that did not need to be filled. "Martha," Nathan said eventually, his voice serious, "I need to know something." Her heart jumped. "What is it?" "Last night, when those women said those cruel things about you, you held yourself together. But I saw how it hurt you. I need to know if you believed them. If you believed the things they said." Martha's hands tightened on the arms of her rocking chair. "I do not know how to answer that." "Honestly," Nathan said, "just tell me honestly." She took a shaky breath. "Some days I think they are wrong, that I am fine as I am. Those are usually the days when I am too busy to think much about it. But other days, when I catch sight of myself in a mirror, or when I have to let out a dress because nothing fits anymore, I hear their voices in my head. I hear all the messages the world has sent me my whole life about how women should look, what shape is acceptable, what size is too much. And on those days, yes, I believe them. I believe I am less than, that something is wrong with me, that I am undeserving of the things other women get to take for granted." "And what do you believe right now, in this moment?" Nathan asked. Martha looked at him, at his face barely visible in the darkness, at the shape of him solid and real beside her. "Right now, with you here, I want to believe I am worth something. I want to believe that maybe those voices are wrong, but wanting to believe and actually believing are not the same thing." Nathan reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand. "Then I will believe it for both of us until you can believe it yourself. I will tell you every day if I have to. You are beautiful. You are worthy. You are perfect exactly as you are. And anyone who says different is a fool and a liar." Tears streamed down Martha's face, mixing with the spray from the rain. "Why do you care so much? You barely know me." "Because everyone deserves to have someone in their corner," Nathan said fiercely. "Because I know what it is like to be told you are wrong for following your heart. Because when I look at you, I see someone brave and strong and so damn beautiful it makes my chest ache. And because in the short time I have known you, you have made me feel more alive than I have felt in years." "I am frightened," Martha whispered. "I am frightened of believing you and then having it all fall apart. I am frightened of hoping." "Hope is the bravest thing there is," Nathan said. "But I understand fear too. So how about this? You do not have to believe anything or decide anything right now. Just let me be here. Let me be your friend if nothing else. Let me show you through my actions what my words are trying to say. And if someday you are ready to hope, to believe, then I will be here. And if you are never ready, if you need me to just be your friend, then I will be here for that too." Martha could not speak past the lump in her throat, so she just squeezed his hand, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a spinning world. They sat like that for a long time, hands clasped, listening to the rain, existing in a moment that felt separate from the rest of time. Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Nathan would rise early and help Martha with breakfast, their conversations flowing as easily as breathing. He would head to the Rodriguez Ranch for the day, working with the difficult stallion and the other horses that needed his particular skills. He would return for supper, and afterward they would walk together, exploring the paths along the creek or simply sitting on the porch when weather did not cooperate. The other boarders grew accustomed to seeing them together, and if they noticed the growing affection between Martha and Nathan, they were polite enough not to comment. George did mention once that he had never seen Martha smile so much, but it was said kindly with grandfatherly approval. Martha found herself changing in small ways. She started wearing her hair down sometimes in the evenings because Nathan had mentioned liking it that way. She took more care with her appearance, not to impress anyone else, but because she wanted to feel pretty for herself. She started believing, just a little bit, that maybe she was worth the attention Nathan gave her. The people of Petaluma noticed. Constance Miller made several snide comments to anyone who would listen about how Martha was making a fool of herself, chasing after a man who would inevitably leave her. Sarah Patterson spread rumors about impropriety, suggesting that having an unmarried man and woman under the same roof was scandalous no matter how many other boarders were present. Martha heard the gossip, of course. In a town the size of Petaluma, everyone eventually heard everything, but for the first time in her life, she found she did not care what they thought. Nathan's steady presence, his genuine affection, his unwavering insistence on her worth, These things mattered more than the opinions of small-minded people. One evening in early September, almost a month after they had met, Nathan and Martha were walking along the creek. The heat of summer was finally breaking, and the evening air was pleasant, with a breeze that made the cottonwood leaves whisper overhead. They had been talking about nothing in particular when Nathan suddenly stopped walking. "Martha, I need to tell you something." Her stomach dropped. This was it, she thought. This was when he would tell her he had to leave, that he had gotten his fill of playing house, that reality had finally caught up with fantasy. "All right," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I am in love with you," Nathan said simply. "I have been falling in love with you since the moment I saw you at that social, and every day since has just made it more certain. You are the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing on my mind before I sleep. You make me laugh. You make me think. You make me want to be a better man. And I know it has only been a month. I know that is not long by conventional standards, but I also know my own heart. I love you, Martha Brennan, and I needed you to know." Martha stared at him, her mind struggling to process the words. "You love me?" "Heart and soul," Nathan confirmed. "Everything I am, I would give to you gladly." "But why?" The question burst out before she could stop it. "I am not special. I am not beautiful in any traditional sense. There are a dozen women in this town who would fall over themselves for your attention, women who are smaller and prettier and more acceptable. Why me?" Nathan took both her hands in his, his expression intense. "Do you remember what I said that first night? That you were real while everyone else was wearing masks? That is still true, Martha. You are genuine in a way most people never manage to be. You work hard without complaint. You are kind without expecting anything in return. You have been hurt, but you have not let it make you cruel. You face each day with courage even when that day is difficult. That is beautiful. That is special. That is why I love you." "I am frightened," Martha admitted, her voice breaking. "I am so frightened, Nathan. What if you change your mind? What if you wake up one day and realize you made a mistake?" "I will not," Nathan said with absolute certainty. "But I understand your fear, so I will keep proving it to you every single day for as long as it takes. I love you, Martha, and I am not going anywhere." Martha's tears were flowing freely now, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of joy, of a hope so fragile and precious that she almost could not bear to hold it. "I love you too," she whispered. "I did not think I could. I did not think I was allowed to want this. But I love you, Nathan Norwood. I love you so much it terrifies me." Nathan pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her substantial form and holding her like she was something precious. Martha buried her face in his shoulder, breathing in the scent of him, leather and soap and horses and something indefinably Nathan. She felt safe in a way she had never experienced, cherished in a way she had never imagined possible. "We are going to be all right," Nathan murmured into her hair. "I promise you, Martha, we are going to be just fine." They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms while the creek gurgled past and the cottonwoods whispered their secrets to the evening breeze. And for the first time in her life, Martha truly believed that maybe, just maybe, she deserved this happiness. The days that followed were some of the happiest Martha had ever known. She and Nathan made no secret of their relationship, and while the gossips had plenty to say, Martha found she could not bring herself to care. Let them talk. Let them judge. She had something real, something precious, and their opinions could not diminish that. Nathan continued his work with the Rodriguez Ranch, and Martha continued running her boarding house. But their evenings belonged to each other. Sometimes they walked, sometimes they sat on the porch and read together, Martha from her small collection of books, and Nathan from the newspapers he picked up in town. Sometimes they just talked, sharing dreams and fears and stories from their pasts. One Saturday in late September, Nathan asked Martha to accompany him to the Rodriguez Ranch. "I want you to see what I do," he explained, "and there is someone I want you to meet." They rode out together in a wagon borrowed from George at the livery, the morning cool and pleasant. The Rodriguez Ranch was several miles outside of town, sprawling land where cattle and horses grazed under the watchful eyes of the ranch hands. Senor Rodriguez himself came out to greet them, a weathered man in his 50s with kind eyes and a welcoming smile. "You must be Miss Brennan," he said, his English accented but clear. "Nathan has told me much about you." "All good things, I hope," Martha said, returning his smile. "The very best," Señor Rodriguez assured her. "Come, let me show you what your young man has accomplished." He led them to a large corral where a magnificent black stallion stood watching their approach with intelligent eyes. The animal was breathtaking, powerful muscles rippling under a coat that shone like polished onyx in the morning sun. "This is Trueno," Nathan said softly. "Thunder. When I first arrived, he would not let anyone within 20 feet without attacking. He sent 2 ranch hands to the doctor before Señor Rodriguez decided to try a different approach." "And now?" Martha asked, watching as Nathan opened the gate and slipped into the corral. "Now, watch." Nathan approached the stallion slowly, talking in a low, steady voice. The horse's ears flicked forward, listening. When Nathan was close enough, he extended his hand, palm up, waiting. For a long moment, the stallion just watched him. Then, with visible deliberation, the great horse stepped forward and lowered his head, allowing Nathan to stroke his nose. "That is amazing," Martha breathed. "It is trust," Nathan said, his hand gentle on the stallion's face. "He has decided I am worth trusting, that I will not hurt him. It is one of the greatest gifts an animal can give." He spent the next hour working with Trueno, showing Martha how he had taught the horse to accept a saddle, to tolerate a rider, to respond to commands without fear or aggression. It was beautiful to watch, the partnership between man and animal, the mutual respect evident in every interaction. "You are very good at this," Martha said when Nathan finally left the corral and came to stand beside her. "It is what I was meant to do," Nathan said simply. "Just like I was meant to find you." Señor Rodriguez invited them to stay for lunch, and they ate with the Rodriguez family, enjoying the hospitality and the delicious food Señora Rodriguez and her daughters prepared. It was a warm, chaotic household, with children running around and multiple generations gathered around the large table. Martha watched with a strange ache in her chest, wondering what it would be like to have this, a family, people to share meals and laughter and life with. As if reading her thoughts, Nathan reached under the table and took her hand, squeezing gently. When she looked at him, he was smiling, his eyes full of promise and possibility. On the ride back to town, Nathan was quieter than usual. Martha let him be, sensing he was working through something important. It was not until they were nearly back to her boarding house that he finally spoke. "Martha, I have been thinking about the future." Her heart started pounding. "What about it?" "My contract with the Rodriguez Ranch will be finished in another few weeks. Trueno is progressing well, and once I have him fully gentled and trained, my work there will be done." "Oh." Martha tried to keep the devastation out of her voice. Of course he would leave. She had known this was temporary, had known better than to hope for permanence. "Where will you go next?" "That depends on you," Nathan said, pulling the wagon to a stop in front of her house. He turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "I have been offered steady work with Señor Rodriguez if I want it. He has other horses that need training, and he is willing to pay well for me to stay on permanently. But I will not take it unless I know you want me here." "Want you here?" Martha repeated, not daring to understand. "I love you, Martha," Nathan said. "I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up in your boarding house every morning and come home to you every evening. I want to marry you, if you will have me. I want to give you the family I saw you watching with such longing at the Rodriguez Ranch. I want everything with you, but only if that is what you want too." Martha could not speak. The words she needed were trapped somewhere behind the shock and the hope and the fear that this was too good to be real. Nathan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. When he opened it, a simple gold band glinted in the afternoon sun. "I know this is not fancy. I know you probably imagined a different kind of proposal, something more romantic. But I am just a horsebreaker, Martha, and this is all I have to offer, myself, my heart, and this ring. Will you marry me?" The tears came then, hot and fast, streaming down Martha's face as she nodded frantically. "Yes," she managed to choke out. "Yes, Nathan, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then he pulled her close and kissed her, and it was like coming home to a place she had never known existed, but had been searching for her entire life. They were married 3 weeks later, in a simple ceremony at the small church on the edge of town. Martha wore a new dress, pale blue with lace at the collar, that Nathan had insisted on buying for her, despite her protests about the expense. Nathan wore his best clothes, freshly cleaned and pressed, with a new hat that George from the livery had given him as a wedding present. The ceremony was small, attended by the boarders from Martha's house, the Rodriguez family, and a few other friends Nathan had made during his time in Petaluma. Notably absent were most of the respectable families of the town, but Martha found she did not care. The people who mattered were there, the people who genuinely cared about her happiness. Constance Miller and her friends made sure to be on the church steps as Martha and Nathan emerged as husband and wife, and Martha heard their whispers, their predictions that the marriage would not last, that Nathan would realize his mistake soon enough. But with Nathan's hand warm in hers and his love surrounding her like armor, the cruel words bounced off harmlessly. "Pay them no mind," Nathan murmured in her ear. "They are just jealous because they have never felt what we have." The wedding celebration was held at the boarding house, with food contributed by seemingly everyone who had attended the ceremony. Senora Rodriguez had made an enormous pot of stew. The Murphy brothers brought fresh bread from the bakery. Sam had somehow acquired a small cake, and George provided several bottles of wine. They pushed the furniture back in the parlor, and someone produced a fiddle, and there was dancing and laughter late into the evening. Martha danced with her husband, and this time there was no shame, no cruel whispers, just pure joy. Nathan held her close as they swayed to the music, and he whispered in her ear about how beautiful she looked, how happy he was, how he could not wait to start their life together. When the guests finally departed and the house grew quiet, Nathan carried Martha over the threshold of what was now their shared room. He set her down gently, his hands cradling her face as he kissed her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I will love you every day for the rest of my life." "I love you too," Martha replied, and this time she said it without fear, without doubt, just pure certainty. Their life together settled into a comfortable rhythm. Nathan continued working with the Rodriguez ranch, building a reputation as the best horse trainer in the county. People began bringing their difficult animals from miles around, willing to pay well for his skills. Martha continued running the boarding house, but with Nathan's income supplementing hers, she was able to make improvements. They painted the exterior, replaced the aging roof, and added a small addition that gave them more private space away from the boarders. Winter came to Petaluma, bringing rain and cooler temperatures. Martha discovered she was pregnant in January, and when she told Nathan, he swept her up in his arms and spun her around despite her laughing protests about her weight. "We are going to have a baby," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "Martha, we are going to be parents." "Are you happy?" she asked, though his joy was evident. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Nathan said. "Ecstatic, overjoyed, blessed beyond measure. You are giving me everything I never knew I wanted." The pregnancy was not easy. Martha suffered from morning sickness that lasted well into the afternoon, and as her belly grew, she found the work of running the boarding house increasingly difficult. Nathan took over more and more of the physical labor, hauling water and carrying heavy pots, and he hired a young woman from town to help with the cleaning and laundry. The gossips had plenty to say about Martha's pregnancy, about how it was scandalous how large she was getting, how she should stay inside and not subject decent people to the sight of her condition. But Martha ignored them, buoyed by Nathan's constant support and the kindness of true friends like the Rodriguez family and her boarders. In late August, almost exactly a year after she and Nathan had met at the social, Martha went into labor. It was long and difficult, and there were moments when Nathan paced the hallway outside their room, terrified he might lose her. But Martha was strong, and when their son was finally born, squalling and healthy, Nathan wept with relief and joy. They named him James, after Martha's father. He had Nathan's dark hair and Martha's blue eyes, and he was absolutely perfect. Nathan proved to be a devoted father, rising in the night to help with the baby, changing diapers without complaint, and spending hours just holding his son and marveling at the miracle they had created together. "Look at him," Nathan would say, his voice soft with awe. "Look at what we made, Martha. He is perfect." As James grew from infant to toddler, the boarding house filled with the sounds of childhood, laughter and crying, and the patter of small feet on the wooden floors. Some of the boarders moved on, but new ones took their places, drawn by Martha's reputation for good food and honest hospitality. The house became known as a welcoming place, somewhere people could feel at home, even when they were far from their own families. Nathan's work with horses continued to thrive. He became a sought-after trainer, known not just in Petaluma, but throughout the surrounding counties. He could have charged more for his services, but he kept his rates reasonable, more interested in doing good work than in getting rich. When James was 2 years old, Martha discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1877, they welcomed a daughter. They named her Eleanor after Nathan's mother, and she had her father's eyes and a disposition so sunny that everyone who met her immediately fell in love. The years passed in a blur of happiness and hard work. James grew into a thoughtful boy who loved books and learning. Eleanor was fearless and adventurous, always climbing trees and exploring the creek behind the house. Martha and Nathan added a third child, another son they named Thomas, who seemed to have inherited both his father's patience and his mother's determination. The boarding house continued to thrive, but as their children grew, Martha and Nathan began to talk about the future. Nathan wanted to buy land, to start a small ranch where he could train horses, and they could raise their family with more space. Martha was reluctant to leave the house her father had built, but she also saw the wisdom in having room for their growing family to spread out. In 1880, when James was 5 and Eleanor was 3, and Thomas was barely walking, they sold the boarding house to a young couple looking to start a business. Martha cried as she said goodbye to the place that had been her home for her entire life. But Nathan held her hand and reminded her that home was not a building, it was the people you loved. They bought a beautiful piece of land 5 miles outside of Petaluma, with a creek running through it and gentle hills perfect for grazing horses. Nathan built them a house with his own hands, with help from Senor Rodriguez and his sons, and some of the men from town who had come to respect Nathan over the years. It was a good, solid structure with enough bedrooms for their children and a large kitchen where Martha could work. Nathan built corrals and a barn and slowly began acquiring horses. Some were young animals that needed training. Others were older horses that had been abused or neglected, that needed patience and care to heal. Nathan worked with each one individually, giving them the time and attention they needed to learn to trust again. The ranch became known as a place where broken things could be mended, whether they were horses or people. Nathan hired hands who had fallen on hard times, giving them work and a second chance. Martha opened their home to anyone who needed a meal or a place to stay, her generous spirit finding new expression in this wider space. Their children grew up surrounded by love and horses and the wild beauty of California. James became interested in his father's work, spending hours in the corrals learning to read horse behavior and body language. Eleanor was more interested in the business side, keeping track of accounts and managing the books with a head for numbers that made Nathan shake his head in amazement. Thomas was still young, but he showed signs of being a natural rider, fearless and graceful, even at the age of 4. On a warm evening in August of 1881, 7 years after they had met at that fateful social, Martha and Nathan sat on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sun set over the hills. Their children were playing in the yard, their laughter floating on the evening breeze. Horses grazed peacefully in the nearby pasture, and somewhere a bird was singing its evening song. "Are you happy?" Nathan asked, the same question Martha had asked him so many times over the years. Martha leaned her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence beside her. "I am so happy I sometimes wonder if I am dreaming," she admitted. 7 years ago, I thought my life was settled. I thought I would always be alone, always on the edges, always watching other people live their lives while I just existed. And then, you walked through those doors. "Best decision I ever made," Nathan said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Asking you to dance that night. They all thought you were crazy," Martha reminded him with a smile. "Constance Miller told anyone who would listen that you must be simple-minded or desperate. And yet, here we are," Nathan said contentedly, "with 3 beautiful children, a successful ranch, and more happiness than any 2 people have a right to claim. I would say we proved them all wrong." "I never thanked you properly," Martha said softly, "for seeing me when everyone else looked right through me, for telling me I was perfect when the world had spent my entire life telling me I was not, for loving me when I did not know how to love myself." Nathan turned her face toward his eyes serious. "You do not need to thank me for loving you, Martha. That is the easiest thing I have ever done. But I will tell you what I am grateful for. I am grateful that you were brave enough to give me a chance. I am grateful that you chose to hope even when hope was terrifying. I am grateful for every day I get to wake up beside you and fall asleep with you in my arms. I am grateful for the family we have built and the life we share. You made me whole in ways I did not even know I was broken. They kissed as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. And in that moment, Martha felt the truth of her life settle into her bones. She was loved. She was cherished. She was exactly where she belonged. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and challenge, triumph and difficulty. James grew into a fine young man, eventually taking over much of the day-to-day horse training from his father. Eleanor, true to her early promise, became the business manager of the ranch, her sharp mind and sharper tongue ensuring they got fair prices and good deals. Thomas developed into an exceptional rider, competing in shows and rodeos throughout California and bringing home more ribbons and trophies than they had space to display. Martha and Nathan grew older together, their hair going gray and their faces gaining the lines that came from a lifetime of laughter and love. Martha never lost the extra weight that society deemed unacceptable, but she also never again doubted her worth. How could she, when every day Nathan looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen? How could she, when her children rose up and called her blessed, when friends sought her counsel, when her life was so full of meaning and purpose? In 1895, James married a lovely young woman from Petaluma, and the following year, they made Martha and Nathan grandparents. Eleanor shocked everyone by choosing not to marry, declaring that she was far too busy running the ranch to bother with courting, though Martha suspected there was more to the story that her fiercely independent daughter was not sharing. Thomas married young and gave them 2 more grandchildren in quick succession, filling the ranch house with the sounds of young life once again. Nathan's reputation as a horse trainer had become almost legendary by this time. People brought him animals from as far away as San Francisco and Sacramento, and he trained them with the same patience and respect he had shown that first black stallion so many years ago. He had taught his children and his ranch hands his methods, and they in turn were teaching others, spreading his philosophy of partnership over domination. Martha had become something of a matriarch in the community, known for her wisdom, her kindness, and her absolute refusal to tolerate cruelty or injustice. She had built relationships with the various ranch wives in the area, and they often gathered at her home for quilting circles and conversation. Even some of the women who had once been cruel to her, like Constance Miller, had grudgingly come to respect her, though Martha was not particularly interested in their opinions anymore. On their 20th wedding anniversary in 1894, Nathan took Martha back to Petaluma, to the social hall where they had first met. The building was older now, in need of some repairs, but it was still standing. They stood outside for a moment, remembering that August evening so long ago. "If I could go back in time and talk to the woman I was that night," Martha said softly, "I would tell her not to be afraid. I would tell her that the hurt she felt was temporary, but the joy that was coming would last a lifetime. I would tell her that she was worthy of love, that she was perfect exactly as she was, and that the most amazing man in the world was about to walk through those doors." "And if I could talk to the man I was," Nathan replied, his arm around her waist, "I would tell him that asking that beautiful woman to dance was going to be the decision that changed everything. I would tell him to hold on tight because he was about to go on the most incredible journey of his life." They went inside, where a social was actually taking place, and to the shock and delight of the younger generation, the older couple took to the dance floor. They waltzed together as they had that first night, moving with the ease of 2 decades of partnership. And as they danced, Martha caught sight of a young woman standing along the wall, watching the dancers with longing and hurt in her eyes. She was a fuller-figured girl, clearly uncomfortable in her own skin, and Martha's heart ached with recognition. When the dance ended, Martha excused herself from Nathan and walked over to the young woman. "Hello," she said warmly. "I am Martha Norwood. I do not believe we have met." The girl looked startled. "I am Rebecca, madam, Rebecca Caldwell." "It is nice to meet you, Rebecca," Martha said. "I could not help but notice you standing here. Are you not dancing?" Rebecca's cheeks flushed. "No one has asked me, madam, and I do not expect they will." Martha smiled, understanding perfectly. "May I tell you something, Rebecca? 20 years ago, I stood in this very hall, in almost the exact spot you are standing now. I was convinced I was unworthy of joy, of romance, of all the things I thought were reserved for women who looked different than I did. And then a man walked through those doors and asked me to dance, and he told me I was perfect. And do you know what I learned that night?" "What, madam?" Rebecca asked, her eyes wide. "I learned that the only person who gets to define my worth is me," Martha said. "I learned that love is not about fitting into some impossible standard, but about finding someone who sees your true value. I learned that courage means showing up even when it is hard, even when you expect rejection. You are here tonight, Rebecca. You came even though you were afraid. That takes strength. Do not let anyone make you feel small for taking up space in the world." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "But look at me, madam. I am not like the other girls." "No, you are not," Martha agreed. "You are uniquely you, and that is something to celebrate, not apologize for. The right person, the person who deserves you, will see that. And until then, you hold your head high and remember that you are worthy of every good thing, exactly as you are." Nathan had come up beside them, and he smiled at Rebecca with the same warmth Martha remembered from their first meeting. "My wife is correct," he said. "She usually is. Take it from someone who has spent his life working with animals and people. The ones who have been told they are not good enough often turn out to be the most remarkable. Do not let the world make you small, Miss Caldwell." They left Rebecca standing a little straighter, a little more hopeful, and as Martha and Nathan walked out into the evening air, Martha felt a sense of completion. She had been that girl, broken and hurting and convinced of her own worthlessness. And now she was a woman who could offer hope to someone else walking the same painful path. The years continued their steady march. Nathan's hair went fully white, and he moved a bit more slowly. But he never lost his gift with horses or his devotion to Martha. She developed arthritis in her hands, making it harder to do the fine sewing and detailed work she had once loved. But she adapted, finding other ways to be useful and productive. Their children gave them more grandchildren, and the ranch house was constantly full of young life. James had taken over most of the horse training by this point, with Thomas handling the riding and competition side. Eleanor had expanded their business, forming partnerships with ranches throughout California and even into Nevada. The Norwood Ranch had become one of the most respected operations in the state. In 1900, Martha and Nathan celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and friends. It was a grand party, with music and dancing and enough food to feed half of Petaluma. Senor Rodriguez, now in his 80s but still sharp as ever, gave a toast in which he called Nathan the finest man he had ever known, and Martha the heart that kept them all going. 25 years ago, Nathan said when it was his turn to speak, his arm around Martha's thickening waist. "I walked into a social hall and saw a woman sitting alone. She was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, though she did not know it. I asked her to dance, and she gave me the greatest gift of my life. She gave me a chance, and from that chance grew all of this." He gestured to the assembled crowd, to the ranch, to the life they had built. "Every good thing I have, every moment of joy, every triumph and blessing, it all traces back to that night when a brave woman said yes to one dance. Martha, you are still the most beautiful thing I have ever seen, and I will love you until I draw my last breath." There was not a dry eye in the house when he finished, and Martha kissed him to thunderous applause. That night, lying in bed with Nathan's arms around her, and the sounds of their family settling in for the night echoing through the house, Martha reflected on the impossible journey her life had taken. She thought about that girl she had been, standing alone at a social, convinced she was unworthy of love. She thought about the cruel words and the judgment, the way society had tried to make her feel less than because her body did not conform to arbitrary standards. She thought about the pain and the loneliness and the resignation to a half-life of existing without truly living. And then she thought about Nathan walking through those doors, about his hand extended in invitation, about his insistence that she was perfect, about the way he had loved her consistently and completely for 25 years, never wavering, never doubting, never making her feel anything less than cherished. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan murmured sleepily beside her. "I am thinking about how grateful I am," Martha replied. "How blessed beyond measure. How this life we have built exceeds every dream I ever dared to dream." "We built it together," Nathan said. "That is what makes it perfect." They fell asleep in each other's arms, as they had for thousands of nights before, and would for many nights to come. The years ahead would bring challenges and changes, as all years do. They would face loss and difficulty, health struggles, and the inevitable sorrows that come with a long life. But they would face them together, their love, the foundation that held steady through every storm. Nathan lived to see his 75th birthday, still working with horses up until the last month of his life. When he passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1908, with Martha holding his hand, it was the end of an era. The entire community turned out for his funeral, a testament to the man he had been and the lives he had touched. Martha grieved deeply, but she was sustained by the knowledge that she had been truly loved, that their life together had been exactly what she needed. She lived another 12 years, long enough to see her grandchildren grown and starting families of their own, long enough to know that the legacy of love and acceptance that she and Nathan had built would continue long after they were gone. When Martha finally passed away in 1920, at the age of 68, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, her last thoughts were of that August evening in 1874, of a tall cowboy walking toward her with determination in his eyes, of a hand extended in invitation, of a voice saying she was perfect, and in the end, that was the greatest gift Nathan had given her, not just his love, though that was precious, not just the life they had built, though that was remarkable, but the gift of believing, truly believing that she was worthy, that she was enough, that she was perfect exactly as she was. The ranch continued to thrive under James's management, and the Norwood name became synonymous with excellence in horse training throughout California. Eleanor never did marry, but she lived a full and meaningful life, eventually retiring at the age of 70, with enough money saved to travel the world she had always wanted to see. Thomas's children and grandchildren carried on the riding tradition, competing at levels their grandfather could never have imagined. And sometimes, on warm August evenings when the stars were bright and the breeze whispered through the cottonwoods, ranch hands would swear they could hear music drifting from the old homestead, the sound of a waltz, and if you listened very carefully, the voice of a man telling a woman she was perfect. Because love like that does not die. It echoes through generations, a reminder that worth is not determined by the size of your body or the judgments of small-minded people. Worth is intrinsic, unchanging, sacred. And when you find someone who sees that truth, who loves you not, in spite of who you are but because of who you are, you hold on tight and you never let go. That was the lesson Martha and Nathan taught, not just through their words, but through the living example of their lives. And it was a lesson that continued to ripple outward, touching lives and changing hearts, long after they had gone. Their graves sat side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under an old oak tree that provided shade in summer and shelter in winter. The headstones were simple, just their names and dates and a single line that James had chosen. Together, they built a life of love. And that, in the end, was the truest thing that could be said. Two people who should never have met, who defied every expectation and overcame every obstacle, who chose each other every single day for more than 3 decades. Two people who proved that love is not about perfection, but about acceptance. Not about fitting a mold, but about celebrating uniqueness. Not about changing yourself to be worthy, but about finding someone who sees your worth exactly as you are. That August night in 1874, when Nathan Norwood walked into a social hall in Petaluma, California, and asked Martha Brennan to dance, he changed both their lives forever. He gave her the gift of seeing herself through eyes of love instead of judgment, and she gave him the gift of a life filled with meaning, purpose, and joy beyond measure. They were not perfect people. They made mistakes and had arguments and faced struggles like everyone does. But they loved each other fiercely and faithfully, and they built something beautiful from that love. A family, a home, a legacy that would last for generations. And on warm summer evenings, when grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered at the ranch for reunions and celebrations, someone would always tell the story of how great-grandma Martha was shamed for her size at a social, and how great-grandpa Nathan asked her to dance and told her she was perfect, how from that single act of courage and kindness, an entire dynasty had been born. The children would listen with wide eyes, and the adults would smile with knowing looks, and everyone would be reminded of what mattered most. Not wealth or status or conforming to society's narrow definitions of acceptable, but love, courage, the willingness to see people for who they truly are and to cherish them exactly as they come. That was the gift Martha and Nathan gave to the world, the gift of their love story, Proof that the most beautiful romance is not the one that looks perfect from the outside, but the one that feels perfect from the inside, the one built on mutual respect and genuine affection, and the daily choice to honor and cherish the person you have committed your life to. And so, their story lived on, passed down through the generations, a reminder that everyone deserves to be loved exactly as they are. That size does not determine worth. That beauty is found in courage and kindness and authenticity, not in conforming to impossible standards. That true love sees past surface appearances to the precious soul within. Martha and Nathan Norwood, a cowboy and a boarding house keeper, a horse trainer and a woman who had been told she was too much and never enough. Two unlikely people who found each other against all odds and built a love that transformed not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone they touched. Their story began with a dance, but it ended with a legacy that would last forever, a testament to the transformative power of love that sees clearly, accepts completely, and cherishes without reservation. And that legacy still lives on today, in every person who refuses to let the world define their worth, in every act of courage that defies cruel judgment, in every love story that chooses authenticity over appearance and substance over superficiality. This is how their story ended, not with tragedy or drama, but with peace, with the satisfaction of a life well lived and love well given, with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried forward their values and their names, with a ranch that still stands, still trains horses with patience and respect, still bears the mark of the two people who built it with their own hands and their boundless hearts. And sometimes, when the conditions are just right, when the music is playing and the stars are bright and love is in the air, you can almost see them, a tall cowboy with weathered hands and kind eyes, extending his hand to a woman with curves and courage and a heart that had been battered but never broken. You can almost hear him say those words that changed everything. May I have this dance? And you can almost hear her say yes,